This video is going to show step-by-step process on how to build a cornhole set. The cornhole can be pretty simple if you're just putting it together with 2x4s and some plywood, but this set that we're going to be building here is a little bit nicer quality. It's going to be made out of some 5/8 inch thick Baltic birch plywood, and actually using the CNC machine to cut a lot of the parts to get them perfect. One unique thing about this board is going to be the leg assembly and the fact that it's all one piece and it folds up into the bottom side. So this will all completely fold in, and then you can just put it in storage easier. Again, just can fold out. Has these little notches in the leg that will just kind of fit perfectly right up where it needs to rest. And so again, heavily supported, and should be a good quality cornhole set when it's all done. So again, we're going to show step by step how to build this, and I'm going to be using the CNC on a lot of these things. Now again, this could be done just without the CNC machine, using just some normal tools, but we're going to have the CNC help us on a lot of these parts. I created a cut list that's going to be very helpful when you're making your cornhole board. Each part is labeled with the number of pieces, thickness, width, and length. And so we're going to get all of this out of one sheet of 5/8 inch thick Baltic birch plywood. Okay, we're going to start off on our panel saw. We're going to take our full sheet of this 5/8 inch Baltic birch plywood and get it up on the rollers here. And out of this entire sheet, we should have enough material for an entire cornhole board set. That would include both boards and all this. This is exactly 8 feet long. And so our first thing we're going to do is just cut it directly in half, so we can get the 2 top pieces out of half of this, and then all the rest is going to be used for all the rest of it. And so we're going to set our stop on our panel saw first at 48 inches. And you'll notice that my tape measure only goes to about 47 or so on this side. So we need to move the saw down. We pull this black handle. We're going to move the whole saw down. This little red square over here, we're going to line these up, lock that in place. That's an additional 40 inches. So now I'm just going to set my fence at 8 inches, and that should be 48, because that's an additional 40. And to get this to be perfectly in the center, I'm actually going to set this at 47 and 15/16, so we're just barely smaller than that, so the blade will cut it perfectly in the very center of that board. So half of this sheet we're going to take over to the table saw and cut our 2 tops from it. The other half we're going to use to cut all their other parts. So come over to the table saw and let's get our fence adjusted to exactly 2 feet, but we're going to go just a 1/16 smaller. That way, when we can get 2 of these out of that full board here, when we cut this in half, it should be exactly. Okay, now your grain direction does matter. We want to make sure these are going the long way with the grain as we're making this cut on the table saw here. So you're going to get now 2 pieces out of that, and both these should be identical as far as size. They're both exactly about 4 feet long and 2 feet wide, and that'll be for both of our tops of our table. Now we're going to bring over our other half of that full sheet that we cut to the table saw, and we're going to cut all the rest of our pieces. We're going to cut 1 strip at 6 inches wide, and then we're going to cut 10 strips at 2 1/4 inches wide. And from all those strips, we should have enough pieces to make our entire cornhole set. Again, you want to make sure it goes with the grain, the same way the grain is going when you make these cuts. So there's our 6-inch piece. We're now going to move our fence to 2 1/4. And cut 10 strips at 2 1/4. Again, the same way the grain's going. You're going to have some extra. Obviously, if you were making more sets, we could use this to keep cutting more strips from and other things like that. The sides, the front, back, and middle supports, the legs, and the leg brace, we're going to cut the length to the exact length that it says on our cut list on the upcut saw. We'll just type in our measurement on those and get all those cut. You could use a miter saw to cut these lengths as well if you'd like. Start off with my sides. They're 46 3/4 inches long, so we're just going to type in 46 3/4 on our adjustable arm here. And I need 4 of those. There's my 4 sides. Front, back, mid supports, they're 21 1/2 inches long. I need 8 of them. Type in 21 1/2. If I take 4 of these, I should be able to get 21 1/2, another 21 1/2, and get all 8 out of these 4 boards. There's all my front, back, mid supports. Okay, our legs need to be 14 1/2 inches long. We need 4 of those. And then our leg brace is out of our 6-inch wide board, and those are 21 3/8. We need 2 of those. All right, once you've got all your parts cut, according to size from your cut list, our 2 tops here, also our leg braces and our leg pieces, we're gonna set those aside for now. And we're gonna focus on our sides and our front, back, and middle support pieces. We're gonna be cutting some pocket holes in these. And I've got a pocket hole machine right here, this green one that we're going to do this with. I also have a blue machine over here that you can also use for this process. We're going to be demonstrating this on the green one. They do the same thing though. On your boards here, so this is one of your front, back, or middle supports. We need to add 2 pocket screws on the left side as well as the right side, and also some coming up into the top part. That'll be on those boards. These ones are just going to have pocket screws going up, one on the right, one in the middle, and then one kind of on the left that'll attach your top. And on your pocket hole machine, we'll show you on just one of these boards here. First off, the on switch is right here. You're just gonna flip this little toggle switch up, it'll turn it on. I'll do that in a second. And then inside the machine, you'll see if I come down lower here, there is a hole right here that a router bit will come out of and cut the pocket. There's also a drill bit right here that's gonna drill a hole. And you'll notice I also put a little center mark right up above the drill bit so you can line it up. There's also some pencil marks drawn on the table, and this will help line things up. So for example, on our sides here, we're going to line this up where your pencil marks are at on the side. And this is about 6 inches over from the edge where it's gonna drill. And then we're gonna come over and do the same thing on this side, on that pencil mark. Again, 6 inches over. And then we're gonna do both the ends. When we do the ends, I've got these little pencil marks drawn on either side of that hole. So we're just gonna line up the board on the right side of that line there, and then on this side, we're gonna line up on the line over on this side as well when we go. To engage it, there's a pedal on the floor right here. And so with it on, we'll go ahead and turn it on now. Again, I'm lining up my board where that line is right there, pressing it nice and tight against the fence. Then we're gonna tap this pedal right here with our foot, and that's gonna engage that little pocket hole. So that's gonna just cut that little pocket hole in there. We'll do the same thing on the opposite side here. Lining it up on those lines, getting it pressed nice and tight against the fence, tap that pedal, and it'll cut that little pocket hole there. Both ends here we're going to do as well, lining it up on those little pencil marks that we drew. And let's go 2 on each of these. So one's on the left side and one's on the right side. We're going to flip our board around and do the same thing on the opposite side. So your board should look something like this, where it's got the 2 pocket holes here, one here, and then 2 over here. Again, this is going to be all of your front, back, and mid supports. Again, your sides, the longer ones, are just gonna have the right side, the left side, and we're gonna go 1, and we're just gonna eyeball it right in the middle. So tap that right side, tap the pedal. Left side, tap the pedal. In the middle, again, we're just going to kind of take a look at the whole thing and eyeball where the center is. If you're not perfectly centered, that's okay, but try to get it right in the middle. So go ahead and get all your boards pocket holed. Once we got all the pocket holes, again, on your front, back, mid support should look like this, 2 on each end and then 2 towards the top. And then your sides should just have 3 pocket holes cut and nothing on the ends. We need to come over to our routers, and we're going to round over some edges. I've got this set up on router number 4 here, just a small 1/4 inch round over bit in there. And on our boards, they've got kind of squared, cornered, sharp edges here. We need to make sure we're only rounding over the bottom edges. And you know it's the bottom because the hole right there is where the screw's gonna come into the top. And so our screw's gonna come up into there. So if it shows a little hole on that end, that's the top part. So we need to round over the bottom part of all of our boards. Now this is again our shorter boards here as well as our longer ones. So again, make sure you identify which is the top, and you know it's the top because you'll see these little holes that the pocket screw machine put in. So we're also going to grab our 6-inch wide boards that are leg braces, and we need to round over these edges as well. We're going to do the bottom and the top, both edges. Double check that we're doing the correct part of this board. We do not want to do the top edge where these holes are at. We're going to do the bottom side, both parts on that. Okay, we're going to be using the CNC machine to cut out several parts for our cornhole. And the first one we'll show is the top board. So once you have your two tops cut to the right size, 2 feet by 4 feet, we'll bring it over. And we'll place it on our little board here, lining everything up. And we need to clamp our top down to the table. We'll just use some of these clamps to clamp it on. We just want to line it up so everything's all perfectly aligned with that white board that we have on here. And we'll just clamp this on the edge just so it doesn't move. I've already referenced the machine to this corner here. The only thing we still need to reference is our Z. If you go to load code, on the desktop, there should be a folder, Cornhole CNC files, and this one we're doing the top. So we go top board, load that code, and then we just go cycle start. Come over and ask us to put in the right bit. The bit that we need for this one is that 1/2 inch end mill. It's already in there. Attach our dust shoe, and it should come over and cut out our hole for our top. When it's finished, you can just use the arrow keys and move the machine out of the way. We'll unclamp our board and you'll do that for each of your tops. Okay, now for our sides, these are these longer pieces here. We are going to be using the CNC to drill the hole where the carriage bolt is going to connect with the leg. And we need to make sure that we get this in the exact spot every time. And to help with that, I've added these little dowel pins in our little piece here. So that way your leg can just go right up against those little dowel pins. And we line it up in the very front. And so it's the same spot every single time. We're gonna make sure this board gets clamped down nice and firm. And we're gonna run the program for drilling the hole in the side. We've switched out the bit to our 1/4 inch end mill and referencing the machine to the very left corner of our board when we go ahead and cut these. And our smart tool pad is going to be on top of our board. We'll do smart tool setup on this one. And another important thing when we're cutting these holes for the carriage bolts is that we have a left side and a right side. So when you're running your boards, the rounded side on this one is facing down. When I put my next board on here, the rounded side is going to face up. That way we have a left side and a right side when we run these. So we'll unclamp that board. And as you can see, it drills a square hole in the top and then just a round hole underneath. That way it'll fit that carriage bolt. When we do our next board here, again, we want to try to keep these in pairs. So this one, I'm going to have the rounded side facing up because the rounded side was facing down on the opposite one. When we clamp this board on, it's important to make sure the clamp is not where it's going to be cutting. So just get the clamp out of the way, but it's got to hold nice and firm. The program's already loaded, so we just have to hit cycle start. and it will cut the exact same thing as it did before. We'll do that same thing for all of our sides, getting all of our little holes cut for the carriage bolts. So when we go to do our legs, again, I've just clamped on a board, the 14.5-inch long one. You're gonna have it lined up nice and even on this part. Our clamp just has to make sure it's not in the way where anything's gonna be cutting. It's gonna be cutting a little angle here, and then it's gonna have a little notch here, another little notch here, and then a rounded part over here. So our clamp just is out of the way, but has to hold that board nice and firm. We've already referenced everything from the sides, and so now all we need to do is load the code that we want to run. So we click on load code, and this one's going to be the leg, newest, and then we hit cycle start. When it's done, we'll pull it out of Okay, if you would like to add some kind of engraving to the side here, we need to design that in our Aspire program. It'll have a spot where you can edit the text here and you can change the name that you want. So I'm just going to select the text, come over to our text tool on the side here, and you can type in whatever name you want. I'm going to, for this one, I'm just going to do my last name here, and we'll hit close. And we need to choose the right toolpath for this. So we've created our own name. We go to toolpaths, and we're going to go to V-carve engraving. It should have everything already kind of figured out here. We just have to come down and hit calculate, and then under toolpaths after calculate, you can hit preview that toolpath, and it'll show you what it would look like carved into your board already. So that's a way that you can kind of preview that to see if you like that. So we're happy with that. We need to save that toolpath. We're going to select the toolpath we want it to engrave and hit save toolpath, and save that to a file here somewhere where you can remember it. We'll come back here. We'll get our sides mounted onto our machine, and we can engrave these. We need to make sure again that you have a left side and a right side when you're engraving these. So those little holes that you cut, one's going to be facing left when we mount your board, the other's going to be facing right. And we just want to make sure the orientation of the board is all correct with the rounded part facing down both times when we run these. Okay, I've switched out the bit to a V-carve bit, and we're referencing the machine for the Z Smart Tool setup, placing that pad where we want it to be at. Again, the X and Y reference has already been done from all the previous boards. We're going to go ahead and load the code, the one that we just designed. Now then when we mount our second board on here, we want to make sure that rounded side again is facing down. This one has the hole on the left, the other one has the hole on the right. So right up against our little pins for reference, clamping it on nice and firm, and then it should have the code already loaded. So once we get this clamped on here, we just hit cycle start. If you did an engraving, and we're going to be painting this engraving, one little tip that will help is to put some lacquer over the top of it first. After we lacquer, let that dry, then we'll paint over it. And when we sand off all the excess paint, it comes off a lot easier if there's been lacquered on it first. Okay, after you've done a quick coat of lacquer over the top of this, let that dry, we're going to paint in the letters. Now we could do a couple ways. One, we can just take some paint brushes and dip in some paint and kind of just splotch it in all over the lettering there, and then we'll sand off all the excess. Quick, easy way, just take some black spray paint and we'll just hit over the lettering there. We'll let that dry and then we'll just sand off all the excess spray paint, and then inside the lettering will stay dark.
Okay, for our leg brace, this 6-inch wide piece, we need to come to the drill press here. I've got a countersink bit in here, and we're just going to pre-drill a couple holes on the end of each one for some screws. Drill in just about an inch or two down from the edge, and countersink, one on each end. Do the same thing on the other side. Before we assemble our leg brace, it'd be a good idea to take a sander and just kind of touch these up on a sander, soften some of those sharp corners, get off any of those little fuzzies that might be on there from cutting this out on the CNC. We're gonna assemble this together just with some screws. Got some 1.25" screws here, and we'll just, again, it was helpful to have this sanded before we put this together. And this just kind of just fit in here. Try to get everything lined up perfectly flush. So we want this support board to fit in there and have this be nice and even and flush on both sides here before we screw this together. Again, just double checking, making sure that it's all perfectly even, no overhanging anywhere as we put this together. Little leg assembly is ready to get some final sanding on it and then attach it to the rest of the cornhole board. Right, for your top, we need to take a round over bit, it's just a small 1/4 inch round over, and get all the corners rounded over, as well as our circle here. We're going to round over the edges of that. Again, we'll just use a small little hand router. We're going to do both sides. We're going to get the whole top side, flip it over, and get the bottom side as well. One thing to be aware of when you're doing this router is that you have it overhanging the edge of the bench, because that router bit will actually stick down and hit in my bench top if you're not careful. So just make sure it's hanging over the edge. And then we're also going to take a sander and just sand the surface up really well. For all the edges, it's probably a good idea to take a little piece of hand sandpaper and soften all these corners and other things after routing as well. Same thing on the middle hole, so we'll get this all sanded up really well.
It's a good idea to do some sanding on all your boards before you assemble it. So we'll get both faces on here, softening any sharp corners on that rounded edge, and then we'll be ready to assemble.
Okay, as soon as that paint's dry, we'll go ahead and sand off all the excess paint and just leave the dark part inside the lettering. Once we've got all of our parts ready to go, so the engraving, we sanded off all the excess paint. We've got all our other pieces and we've hit these on a sander just kind of briefly, clean them up. We're going to start to assemble this. And again, we're going to be using pocket screws that fit into here. I've got a whole bunch of 1¼ inch pocket screws that we're going to use for this. And to make this easy, I've got some little spacer boards that will help align everything up exactly where it should go. So we just want to kind of just lay it all out, how it's going to come together and screw together, making sure that our holes for the carriage bolts are both on the same direction. So those are going to be over here, and then our little front, back, and mid supports will kind of fit together like this. It doesn't matter which direction these middle ones go, whether it's this way or this way, it does not matter. So we'll just kind of place those in here. And this board here is going to be inset 1/4 inch. So I just have a 1/4 inch spacer. I'm just kind of matching it up even on the end. And we'll just take a clamp, kind of clamp it down so it doesn't move on us. And we're just trying to get everything perfectly lined up, even, flush, with our spacer board added on both ends, and then we'll get some pressure on that. We'll suck that in with some pocket screws. These little spacers here tell us, if we put those right here, where this middle support board goes. So that'll just butt right against our little spacers. Then we can pocket screw those in at that point, and we'll use the same spacers on the opposite side over here for that. So on your pocket screws, they're just a square drive. So we put our square drive bit in, and we'll just suck these down. But it should be pretty good. Double check, make sure everything's lined up. If things have moved or shifted on you, making sure everything's perfectly where it should be at. One more. I like to get both ends, so we're going to get that end done next, and then we'll get the middle part last. Get it all flushed up, we'll clamp it so it doesn't move on us. Just to get those set even. And I still like to put a clamp on here when I'm going to screw these down. So we got the frame put together. When we go to put the top on here, we're just going to use the same pocket screws to screw it down. We want to make sure our hole is in the right location, and also our overhang is equal on all the sides here. And a couple things on the top before we attach it. First off, it's a good idea to have it sanded. It's a little bit easier to do it now than after it's on. The other thing is, plywood comes with a good face and a bad face, really. So you look at both faces of your board and decide which is the best looking. And this Baltic birch typically is pretty good looking on both, but you might have some defects or other things more on one side than the other. So look at your best looking face and we want to have your best face up. I think I like this face best, so we're going to have this face up when it's all said and done. And so that's going to be like that. My good face is facing down on the bench. The other thing is you want to make sure your holes for the carriage bolts are in the same spot where the hole is at here. We've had several people in the past assemble these with the leg assembly over here and then it's backwards. So just pay attention to that. Make sure everything's where it should be. And we just want to try to center this the best we can. I use my same spacers, and I just put these spacers on the outside, and it should be equal overhang on both sides. So I just kind of check that along the whole thing, making sure that it's nice and even. If I need to shift one side, I can. And then also on the ends, if I have those equal, then it should be an equal hangover there and here. Double check that. I think we're good right there. So that kind of just shows an equal hangover all the way. You could take a tape measure and measure every spot, but I just like to line up our little spacers on there. We'll use our same pocket screws to suck this down. I do like to kind of start on one end and then just double check, make sure everything's still straight when we go to do the other side. And then we'll just suck these down. Okay, and there we got our top attached. Nice and tight on there. Looks good. Okay, next we got to attach our leg assembly here. So we've already put this together. It's already been sanded. And I've got some 1/2-inch carriage bolts. They're 2-inch long ones. 1/2-inch diameter on that. And then just some 1/2-inch wing nuts that'll attach on here as well. And so these will just fit into the spot that it needs to. So this should just fit into here. Get one on each side. The square part of that carriage bolt should kind of fit right into that little square hole of our side that we did the CNC on. And that should come out and match up right where our little notches are at. I'm going to add probably some stripes on the top here, but we could do other things to it, painting wise or design wise. If you want to just leave it plain, we could leave it plain just like that. We're definitely going to put some kind of lacquer or something on here as well. Okay, I decided I am going to paint some things on here. A lot of cornhole sets either have like a triangle here or some stripes or some other design on here. I've made a couple templates. If you want to do a triangle, we can put this on here and trace this where we're going to be painting off. I think I've decided I want to do some stripes. And so I just made, again, a couple templates here. Wherever you want to put the stripes, we can put these on and then tape off and then paint. I think that's what I'm going to do on this one. So I'm just going to measure about 5 inches from each side, and I'm just going to clamp these on. Each one about 5 inches. Now you can go whatever distance you want. So we'll get it on each side here, 5 inches in, and then same thing on the front over here as well. We'll just get some tape and mask it off on either side of these stripes here. So it'll be right up against it. I like to take my time and make sure it's all nice and perfect and straight so that our stripe looks good after we paint it on here. Unclamp our boards. then we'll just paint in between the tape. And we'll be ready for lacquer. Okay, I'm just gonna paint just in between the stripes here. Just try to be careful to keep your brush on the side here so don't get paint where we don't want it. And we'll just roll it on. Okay, once that's dry, we'll go ahead and carefully take all the tape off. Occasionally after you paint, it's a little bit rough. And so once again, that's perfectly dry, maybe really lightly sand over it with some fine sandpaper before we put the lacquer on this. Blow off any dust right before we go to lacquer, and we're going to make sure we get at least 2 coats of lacquer on this. We're going to let this first coat of lacquer dry for at least 20 minutes or so. Once it's dry, we'll scuff it with a little sanding pad, and then we'll put one last final coat of lacquer on it. All finished. Now, of course, once you build it, you have to try it out.